Welcome back to the channel. Oliver Phil here, and this is going to be part 4 of the Cummins swap update. So today, finally, where I was originally going to start in part 1, I'm going to get this engine out of the stand, get this adapter plate bolted on, get this flywheel put on, clutch, pressure plate, new PTO drive hub, there's the old throwout bearing, new throwout bearing, and I just took the throwout bearing casting out of the parts washer, get it blown off, and we'll get it put in here, and we should be able to get this thing mated today, so I can move to the next step in the process of bringing in the frames and working on the front mount. But here's what the engine looks like currently. We have the dual fuel filter set up. I got a couple other lines to run. I got the lift pump to install still, the electric solenoid to shut the injection pump down, which I still have to install, but we got an injection pump, lines, injectors, return lines, intake on. Here's that intake that I told you that this is just finger tight, that I'll be able to clock that. And got the fan drive, water pump, tensioner, alternator bracket all on. I just got to mount the alternator and then I can put the belt on, and we'll determine how far away this is going to be from the fan shroud, and have to come up with a fan shroud and a radiator still. There's the oil supply line that I didn't have. Well, didn't have for the combine, I had it for the Magnum. Got an oil filter to change still, and got the pan on. The exhaust manifold is all torqued down. I do have oil. I'm gonna run the John Deere break-in oil in this for the first, 50, 80, 100 hours. Help that number 5 piston and sleeve take its time breaking in, and then I'll switch this, drain it all, and switch this back to 1540 that I run and everything. So won't be a big deal to get a little bit of hours on it and change the oil anyway. Many different ideas out there on that, but that's what I'm going with. So I'm going to get you set up here, try to get this mated today. And I've also kind of been working on these Fender tanks. I got the fuel line I still need to finish mounting. Also, the previous owner had 3 remotes on this. This won't work with the factory hydraulic remote lever housing. This is the lever that you would need. It goes back here and shoots it to the back. I'll cover that in the video. So I'm going to swap that out because I'll keep 3 remotes, and then I'll show you guys again when I plumb the tanks in how that's supposed to be, if you don't know. Yeah, so floor plate still after that, and lots to do, but gonna run. I got the oil pressure sender and the oil pressure warning light sender, and also a temperature gauge sending unit as well in for Maybach for a 2150 to match this dash. That way everything will work like it should. I'll run the warning light and the gauge for oil pressure, and the tachometer in the 2150 was updated to electronic because of the external oil pump update, for those of you who don't know. So I will just again hook that up to the alternator on this engine, so then we should have RPM. Now, does the tach work in this dash? That's another question to be answered later. So I'll get you set up, and we will see about getting this thing bolted together. I hope I got all the hardware that I need. If not, I'll have to make another trip. Well, here we are at the back of the engine. Got the adapter plate on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 10 bolts holding that on. Another thing I noticed, I'm not worried about it, I'm just going to send it. So the reason I worked on the engine first was because I would not be able to pull the oil pan down to work on it because it is blocked. These bolts here, 4 of them. To be able to get them out, even if I notched here, to get them out with a swivel, I just didn't see it happening. Then I just noticed these 2 holes are blocked now that I moved to the rear sump oil pan. And I thought about, well, what if I cut or slot the bottom 2 holes and have bolts already in the bell housing? Well, when you slide everything together, you can't just drop it straight down. So we're going to run without those. So we'll have these up the side and these up the side, and that ought to hold it. They're 5/8 bolts plus dowels, and it's not like other tractors where the transmission just bolts to the engine and that's the frame of the tractor. This has a frame that'll be bolted to the bell housing, and then the frame rails that come up the side will bolt to the front axle. So I'm not too worried about it. So we're going to run it. So now I got the adapter plate on. I did paint the one side that I wouldn't be able to get, and I'm not too sure I'm going to mess with this side at all. I might hit it a little bit, but maybe I'll hit it real quick and then I'll mess with the flywheel. So I'm going to check the flywheel, get it set, get the throwout bearing in here, and get you set back up. Well, we got the flywheel up on and just snugged them down, and I did paint on the other side. So I'm going to put this in place here so I can hold it. See if I can't get you in a better spot. So I'm going to go first. We're going to torque it to the spec for the Magnum. Which is basically 101. That should be good enough for me. There's 4 of them. 4 more to go. And I'm going to check them all again. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would check 7, 8, 9, Yeah, now I will get the PTO drive hub. Also, I'm thinking of checking the starter real quick, make sure it's gonna mesh. So she's torqued down, got the pilot bearing put in this drive hub, held in with a snap ring, made sure that that goes over the input shaft. And this is a tight fit here. But I imagine you want a tight fit. Let's find my bolts. I went and got brand new ones. Thinking, what length do I want? Well, this is, like I said, this part isn't new, but it all fitting correctly is to me, but because it's a custom made flywheel. Should all fit. I did put the starter on, which I'll show you guys. And it seemed to fit as good as it needs to be. There it goes. Little persuasion. Remember, these are calculated taps per manufacturer spec. There we go. Get her snug down. There we go. You can see how that popped all the way in there. So we're making progress. And then here was the starter. Looks to be just what I want. Could have cleaned that one off, but running a gear reduction, so it'll be nice. Just sit back up here, get those torques down, and then get the clutch pressure plate. Alright, I got this thing prepped and rehooked, chain hoist. I got my help, and we're going to try to do this hopefully one time, but that never works out. So I'm going to put you guys where you can see, hopefully, and we'll give it a try. Clutch pressure plate is on, and all torqued down, so nothing that you missed there. So new throwout bearing is in, everything's lubed the way it should be, so we will see. Alright, so that actually went really well. It might have looked like we didn't know what we were doing, but it worked. First try. She's finishing the last couple bolts. Went with the little shorter ones because this oil pan, the long bolt, wants to hit and it won't turn and curve in, which ain't a big deal because it still goes in a ½ inch. Which I was thinking of maybe going to get different bolts and getting one with Allen head bolts to get it to fit better. So still may end up doing that, but we got these bolts in, lined up on the dowel, and it went well. I was surprised. Appreciate the help, and the dogs are running around here too.
That one won't fit.
And yeah, so she found out over here, even going to the short one won't fit here, so we're gonna have to go with I think an Allen head bolt will work. I'm not sure. I don't like it, but you know, we'll make adjustments, figure it out. All right, so briefly on the fuel line, coming to the fuel tank fenders. Here is a factory, it's slightly bent here, but here is a factory fitting. And that goes from the large end of the elbow, still available, to a 5/8 inside diameter. Then you would use this little 5/8 to 3/8 barb, which you can actually get one today. They don't make these anymore. But you would just get a barb 5/8 to 3/8 fuel line, because we're going to go from here to this fuel line right here, which then goes around to the other side. But inside here, not currently, are check valves, which is what, hang on, let's get you placed here, which is what is needed. Come on now, there we go. Which is what is needed to stop it from flowing back, keep the vacuum on it. You would have a non-vented cap on the main tank and vented caps on the fender tanks. So here is the original check valve, and this is the new, still available, redesigned check valve, and that will allow fuel to be sucked down out of the tank but not allow it back into the tank. And that just gets shoved down into this hose, which is not the easiest thing to do. You could use a socket or your fingers. But let me get that shoved in the hose here. It's a tight fit, but that's all that holds it, is the tension inside there. A lot of times I'll try to stick it on here and see if I can't get the hose in. Okay, so there, the hose is on. And then if you want, you can pull it back down and see if your check valve stayed. So if you look, hang on here. If you look, the check valve is in place. So you could blow through it, but nothing will happen on the other end. So it allows fuel down through, but not the other direction. So put that on. Then you have hose clamp here for your barb, which will go here. Again, that's 5/8, and then it's rubber hose to the steel line. And that is how fuel tank fenders work. Check valve still available, like I said. The hose is still available. You can't get the adapter, but those are available in the automotive world. So, well, as you can see here, it's hooked up. Rubber hose over to the line. I got some brackets I made. Usually they're probably just, I think it's just one of these brackets on each side to tuck this closer to the back, but I got it running comfortably there. There's a line back in there that shoots off to allow that hose to come over to here. So what I'm going to do is all that's going to get to come back off again, because something we'll talk about. This is an earlier tractor, and it had I think they called it the cooler pump. Let me see if I got it underneath here. Yeah, right there is the cooler pump. It was typically ran off the belt. That one was ran off of, I think what was that on the Moline? Either the back of the hydraulic pump. There was a hydraulic pump on the Moline up here, and on an Oliver, commonly driven off of the V-belt. Well, I'm going to the modern serpentine belt, so I'm not going to be able to do that. A lot of you guys out there may not be able to do that either. Plus, why would you want that? So, this was part of it. This line comes up, suction line to that cooler pump. This was the return line or pressure line. It was very low pressure, but circulating pump really to help cool the rear end transmission. So basically I'm going to eliminate that and do the update. So later tractors had a cooler pump inside underneath this hydraulic cover. So I think I'm going to go that route. I'm going to go ahead and pull this whole hydraulic unit off and get down in there and put the modern cooler pump in, just to kind of update this. And then I don't want to have another little pump that I have to try to rig up a V-belt to run. So we'll pull all this back off and do that while we're at it. Just something that should be done now before floor plates get put on and any type of painting. So definitely something that should be done. I think that update makes it a more usable tractor as well. Don't have to worry about heating up the transmission and not getting it cooled enough, especially with what I plan to do with the tractor, and it's just good to update it anyway, and that's the goal with this whole tractor. More modern engine, update it to the best of my ability and make it usable. So we'll visit that. This line will change then, because this will just be both low pressure up to the cooler at the radiator, back to the transmission, because the pump will be in the rear end. So keep an eye out for that video. We'll cover that. Got my clutch adjusted, and got to do some other things. I got a throttle. This throttle cable or rod, as you can tell, is plenty long. Master pump would have been way up here on that 585. Now we're back here, so get that cut and threaded. Got the frame rails bolted on now to get an idea. Boy, it's a little bit of a difference. This is not a small Cummins, and the Moline front mount was right here. So it's set back clearly a decent amount of way, but once we get, this is like I said where the mount was at, so now I got to make mounts that'll go to here. We can utilize either all 4 of those holes or just the front 2, but probably build a block that goes here, I'm guessing. I got a friend of mine coming over to help come up with that idea from Fubar Fab. And real close here, but it works, and just barely touches, which is fine because we're going to put the mount right here, and then it'll be rigid, no rubbing. And I think it's going to work great. Fits in there, looks good. Then I'll bring in the front axle and get it all slid in here and bolted back in. Come under here, you have the rear of the hydraulic cylinder pins, and then right about here is where the plates go for the rear wishbone mount on the axle. And you can see there was that center sump oil pan came to here, and it was going to hit. So that's why we had to go with a rear sump pan to avoid the front axle. So, well, I call it the wishbone, but the back half of the axle. So that's why we had to do that. But I don't think there's going to be a ton of modification to the frame rails other than adding in probably solid steel, very similar to what they did up here, to made up with the engine. So see which route we go there. And a couple odds and ends I still got to do. Got to get the alternator put on, put the serpentine belt on. I'm just running bolts to hold the pulley on for the test fire. I still have to determine fan distance and where that'll go and which size fan I'm going to go with. We do have oil in it, and I got one fuel line coming before I can mount the lift pump. So I got the lift pump ready to go on, and there's a fuel line that'll come up here to my fuel filter housing. Then I can put the return line on from the injectors, and then we have a return line barb from here that's hose. So we'll run that into my test tank, and then we'll run a supply line temporarily from the test tank to the lift pump, and I'll get some power to it and we can try to test fire it. But I got to cap some lines here, loop the lube line and the cooler for the 3-speed. That way try to hook up my oil pressure sending units, and not running it very long, just a quick test fire, check oil pressure, check fuel, and shut her down. So I don't have coolant in it, but I do have the temp sensor in. Yeah, it's coming along. It's a slow process, definitely not a quick one. Also, depending on how much money you have, is whether the process is quick or not. So it's starting to dry up. I got the white battery box step here. I got to do some work to it. I'm gonna cut the old tray out and try to bend and get another tray set in and welded, and paint it up. And I'm gonna run this, so I'd like to get this set in to get battery power to it, but I can always rig up a battery in the meantime. I like the idea of the factory G1355 box over here. It's like the Oliver, like on my 2255, shorter run to the starter. But I like the idea of having, I like that step, just getting up on, having those 2 steps, plus I could always add the 3rd to that one. I like it. So that's what I'm running with. So a little bit longer battery cables, but I have all that in stock, so I'm not worried about it. So let me get some more things in place and I'll get you back here. Alright, so revisiting the cooler pump dilemma. So this was originally on a lot of these older tractors. My 2255 has a similar cooler pump, belt driven. Again, This one technically would have been belt driven, but the Moline could drive it off of the back of a hydraulic pump. So, little stub shaft. So anyway, we had this suction line on the cooler pump system. And then you had a line here going to the cooler. Then this was an update. See that T there, or that 90-degree fitting? Then that was what this hose is tied into, which comes back here to your bleeder for the filter. And that was supposed to help with, I believe it was sucking air. They had a TSB. I tried looking for it again. But I talked to another Oliver mechanic, and he said, I remember them doing something like that to help with cavitation, I can't remember, or air in the system. Because those pumps, when they were originally mounted higher on the Olivers, they were sucking air. So they tried to get them down as low as you could to the frame to help prevent that. So either way, to delete this pump, Mayball Tractor has a fix. I talked to another gentleman. We could open up, remove this hydraulic unit, and on another tractor he has added a shaft-driven cooler pump down inside the rear end. Well, underneath the hydraulic unit. And then that's one option, but what Mayball has done is you take this line here, it comes out of the top of the Vickers pump, and basically you'll crush this line and braze it, or however you want to do it. Take this nut out and weld the whole thing solid. That's probably what I'll do. Or something like that. I'll just make that solid. Then you have a line and another fitting that goes in here. This is going to be your supply. So that's going to go back up with a new hose all the way to the front, and it's going to go in one side of your cooler. Then the other line coming out of the cooler goes back to its original location here, and that is now going to be your circuit. And then you take this big, I think it's like a 5/8 suction line, or you take that, comes up under the dash to the transmission or hydraulic base here, and you need to plug this off as well. So plug 2 lines, add a hose and a couple fittings, run it up to the cooler and then back, and that will actually lower the hydraulic temperature by about 30 degrees, they said. So I will do a video of doing that, but I kind of wanted to go over that on this video. And then I can now eliminate this hose and put this back to where it's just a bleeder here. So I'm going to go ahead and get the T off and get that hose out of the way, and then put the bleeder where it should be by itself. And then I will take this line, cap it, do the same thing with this line, cap it, and that will take care of the cooler pump issue. So just kind of, that was after more research and calling around, and I know Mayball, they've done a ton of Cummins conversions with 5.9s and 1855s and whatnot, so they've definitely been a big help, but still a big, well, haven't necessarily done it on a 1355 that I know of. Somewhere out there I've seen one, but not in person. So trying to share what I can. And then just about ready on this, I got the lift pump on. I just need to get my 90-degree fitting for my fuel inlet from the tank, which at some point I'll be bringing that in to kind of see where I'm at on all the test fitting. And then also I got a banjo fitting for my return. And then I'll just finish my battery box, and then I can actually crimp and put my cables on, so that way I'm not, during the test fire process, worried about just taking battery power over there. That needs to be done anyway, which is well underway, as I have a new plate to go on the side of the box here, and then have made a new tray that was set in here. And these are bent and will look like the original once I get that done. So it's well underway, so I appreciate it. I still have to do a video, which I'll include changing this line and showing you about that housing that sits over this, because like I said, this is not going to work. But I'll revisit that. So just another quick little update. So I will get this one done, get it out there, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. And I believe this is the part 4, so keep an eye out for part 5. I'll catch you later. Thanks.